Welcome to the Skill Talks Disrupt podcast, where we dive into the world of innovation and technology. My name is Melica, and I'm the host of Skill Torch Disrupt and also the founder of Skill Torch, which is a recruitment company specializing in digital and tech industries across the globe. Today, we're going to be diving into AI's impact on public transit and digital mapping. And today, I have a very special guest with me who's going to be diving in deep into this. I'd like to welcome Renee Ray from Hayden AI. Renee, really pleased to have you here on the show.
Thanks, Melica. Excited to be here and talk a little bit about the artificial intelligence and computer vision technology that Hayden has brought to the transit industry.
Fantastic. Well, I think it would be great to tell the audience a bit more about your background and also diving deep into what Hayden does.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit about my background. My training is actually as an urban planner. So I got a master's in urban planning from UNC Chapel Hill quite a while ago, it feels like now, and have worked for local governments, regional governments as a federal contractor. And really, a lot of what I've done is try to figure out how to reduce barriers to access and make the transportation industry safer and more accessible for a range of different ways of traveling. So, pedestrian and bike planning. I've worked in demand response travel for older adults and people with disabilities. And I moved into technology about 5 years ago. And frankly, it was because as a government employee, I had been handed a technology project to manage that my leadership was unhappy with because it didn't fix the problem they wanted it to fix. And I had to learn about it enough to go back to them and say, the vendor did everything we asked for. The contract is in scope. They delivered to our requirements. And if this technology doesn't fix a problem, it's not really on the vendor. It may be more on us and what we were looking for and what we needed to fix the problem. So I thought maybe there's room for me in the technology industry. I'm on my second tech job now, and frankly, feel like I've been able to make a lot of contributions because of the skill set I bring into this. And I mean, the reason that I joined Hayden was because having experienced and seen the product, even back when it was still just in the sort of prototype and demo phase, I could see that it worked well enough and that it really fixed a problem that transit agencies have. So I'm going to launch right into what we do. So Hayden AI uses computer vision through a hardware solution set that we manufacture. It's a couple of different cameras. It's a compute box, what we call the brain on the bus. And so if you turn the
I
bus
like that.
on, the cameras turn on. And as the operator drives the bus down the street, our cameras are identifying, vehicles, lane lines, presence of things like bus stops or sidewalks, and the camera is interpreting what it's seeing. So the use case that agencies have asked us to develop and that we're developing are around keeping dedicated bus lanes and bus stops free from illegally parked vehicles, right? So the things that the cameras are interpreting are these illegally parked vehicles. We're using the business rules that the agencies have told us they have in place to send a little snippet of that video through the cloud. A human reviews it, the person gets a ticket in the mail, but basically we've come up with a use case for computer vision and machine learning that really helps agencies solve a problem that they've had for a long time, which is how do we keep these lanes clear when it doesn't make financial sense to just pay parking enforcement officers to stand around on every street corner waiting for someone to park illegally.
That's really fascinating. I really enjoyed listening about your background and your journey to get into Hayden AI today. How did you come across Hayden in the first place?
Yeah, so my previous technology role was at a company called Conduent. And so Conduent is what used to be called like a business process outsourcer or a payment platform. And they also did traffic violations. So it was a company where, say you had 100 million different processes that you had to execute, really accurately in a year. So they kind of specialized in those extremely large volume processes. And so we came across Hayden because we were trying to figure out what are some other traffic enforcement startups in the market that we might want to partner with. And I actually first heard about Hayden in February of 2020, so right before COVID happened. And I remember I got a phone call from our sort of technology innovation officer who said, we have to find a way to work with this company. I've never seen anything like this. They're going to do great things, and we need to find a way to work with them. So I managed the relationship with Hayden through most of the period where they were prototyping and demoing and improving their product roadmap. And so once they raised their Series A, came on board to help them figure out, okay, we have a product that works. How do we market it, and how do we talk to industry leaders to persuade and educate them on why our technology is useful to them?
Nice. And how's the journey been so far? I mean, I see your content quite regularly on LinkedIn. You seem to be on the press quite a bit. You seem to be on like LA News. Believe there was some
Yeah,
other ones as well.
it frankly has been such an incredible journey. So I started as employee number 16 in October of 2021. We're up to about 120, 130 employees now. So I've seen tremendous growth. I've been able to help build the team that I participate on. So, public policy folks, marketing people, sales and business development, and frankly, the amount of professional growth I've been able to experience by just, being employee number 16. We've got to figure out what the job tasks are. We need
Hmm.
people to be able to pitch in, and doesn't matter what's in your job description. You're gonna help out, and you're gonna learn a skill as you're doing it. So, um, frankly, this is the best performing team I've ever been on. So,
Oh,
as
nice.
someone who's in my mid 40s, it's really great to feel like I took a risk by coming to work at a startup. And it's really paying off both in terms of, the fact that the startup is succeeding and we're adding clients, but also just in my personal satisfaction with really genuinely enjoying the coworkers that I spend my days with.
And also, they've got an important vision based on, your background and interest. It's really about, um, you know, traffic and things like that. But I'd also be keen to understand a bit more about that mission. So, what is it that you're focused on trying to achieve, but also the business? So, you're talking about traffic enforcement, you're talking about parking attendants. So, what is the impact on all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, transit agencies in the US, which is where so far we have our client base, a lot of them have been investing in the past, handful of years in dedicated bus lanes and in trying to improve bus operations to a point where they're increasing their ridership and they're providing a great service for their transit riders. And so, you know, one thing that's really important to them obviously is getting a return on investment. So when they're, especially if you're dedicating a travel lane to a bus and, potentially removing a lane from allowing private vehicles to travel on it, you're taking a political risk, and you want to
Hmm.
see the reward of increasing bus speeds and actually improving your on-time performance. What a few agencies have found is they would roll out these dedicated bus lanes, but they would have so many illegally parked vehicles that the bus is continuing to weave in and out of these parked cars. And they're really not getting the return and the improved customer experience that they were looking for. Um, what we have been able to do is not even disrupt a manual process so much as offer a new solution that didn't exist before. So, obviously people have been, physically writing parking tickets for decades, but what
Yeah.
we've been able to do is develop a camera system that, instead of being on a fixed pole and viewing maybe 200 or 300 feet, the camera is on the bus, and wherever the bus goes, the camera is monitoring and potentially gathering parking violations. And I think one thing really powerful about that too is if you receive a ticket from one of our buses, you know that you were blocking a bus because that's how the ticket was issued, right? So, one thing that's really powerful too is that we have seen so far in the work that we've done, um, very low recidivism. So the number of people that are getting multiple tickets. So our flagship client, our first client is the New York Metropolitan Transportation Authority,
Yep.
and they have released data that of the drivers who get one of these illegal parking violations, 86% of them have not gotten a second ticket. So it really does seem to be changing driver behavior, improving on-time performance, and getting those lanes clear, which is what we're hoping for. Um, I will also say one thing that really excited me. We actually WMATA, so the Washington D.C. Transit Authority, just put out its press release this week that they are also rolling out Hayden AI technology for bus
Oh,
lanes, but
right.
also for bus stops. Yeah, so obviously there's a lot more bus stops than there are
Yeah.
dedicated bus lanes, and even more so than operational performance, keeping bus stops clear is really important for folks with disabilities. And it can be a huge range of people, anywhere from someone who's using a wheelchair to someone who, just needs the ramp because, walking up and down stairs is difficult for them. And so, um, unfortunately, the one survey that I know was done about 3.5 years ago, and it was from a PhD student named Marcel Moran, who walked up and down every single bus stop in San Francisco, which is easy to do because it's pretty geographically small.
Right.
And what he found in his one-time survey was about 30% of every bus stop he saw was blocked by an illegally parked vehicle. And unfortunately, we have a number of folks with disabilities who rely on transit for all of their transportation needs. And so the potential impact of what WMATA is going to do with bus stop enforcement is, I think, extremely powerful for making it easier and safer for disabled folks to use the bus.
Yeah. I mean, I was actually going to point out not only your this is actually being used to um, provide violation tickets and things like that, but actually it's really more of a safety precaution because actually this will be more of a deterrent, so making sure that the lanes are clear, and then prevents people from um accidents occurring, or blocking their way. And obviously, yeah, it can obviously affect those that are disabled, so I can really see this actually being more of like benefiting individuals, in terms of liability and also their safety.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I've really appreciated as someone who was formerly a very frequent Twitter poster and now is using mostly Threads, frankly,
Yeah.
is that we seem to be in the sort of halo effect where transit riders are really excited about the fact that these cars are getting out of their way and that the bus itself is helping do the ticketing. And so we've actually got some fans among transit nerds, which, government agencies can, they take a lot of heat, from constituents sometimes. So it's been nice to be part of something that really puts the agencies in a positive light.
Um, I'd be keen to understand. So, I mean, when you compare like Europe public transportation to the US, I'd say, based on my experience, in Europe, like public transportation is used very, very frequently, and it's very normal and it's used every day.
Hmm.
Then you go into like the West Coast, you go to places like Los Angeles, where a lot of people actually choose not to use public transportation. So where I'd be interested to know about like how Hayden kind of like sees that correlation, and actually have they really looked at like, okay, obviously in New York people do use the public, they use like the metro system and things, but
Hmm.
yeah, I'd be keen to see like how they've sort of like mapped that out in terms of like, okay, can they encourage people to perhaps use it a bit more, and really delve into the benefits of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's so difficult to compare the US to Europe, partly
Yeah,
just because we're so much more spread out that the sort
right.
of land uses and the average parcel size is
Yeah,
very different. And then also, the level of taxation and regulation that we subject ourselves to is lower than I think most countries in Europe.
yeah.
But I think too, as a city planner, every city is different. So you can have a best practice that works really well in New York that can be more challenging in LA. And it could
Hmm.
be topography, it could be just geographic size, it could be something like demographics, like age, how ages are spread out. But there are it's hard to say, well, we have a solution that works great in New York, and so we're going to bring that same solution to like Pittsburgh or Houston or LA, and it's going to work. And I think, frankly, that's probably why we've also been doing a number of pilots. Um, like we've just recently wrapped up a pilot in Santa Monica, which I think you mentioned
I
KTLA.
used to
So
live
that
there as
that was part
well.
of. Oh, not. Oh, wow. Okay, it's
Yeah,
such an
yeah,
amazing city,
it
and it's
is.
nice to see them in the news for something besides, like illegal scooter dumping and that kind of thing. Um,
Right.
yeah, yeah, beautiful place. Um, I've lost my train of thought. Oh, I think so. I think I think that our solution has potential application in a number of different cities, but
Hmm.
I think what is different by the city is sort of, first of all, do they have the lane right of way for dedicated bus lanes? So if you were to look at a number of cities, as you kind of go out west, a lot of times the right of way, the lane width, or the number of lanes on a street changes, and there could be places where, transportation engineers in the 1950s made a plan for a road, and it doesn't really reflect how people travel today, and
Mm,
actually dedicating space only to a bus lane is actually a great way to sort of right size the use of a street. And in addition to serving a transit goal. So I think it's always hard to generalize, but we certainly feel like we have a product that's useful because, unfortunately, based on the anecdotal evidence we have, illegal parking in both the bus lanes and the bus stops is fairly widespread, at least across the US and in some parts of Europe, from what we've been able to gather from some of the conferences and meetings that we've had with folks in different countries over there.
that's really interesting insight. And actually, when I lived in Santa Monica, I did actually take the bus there. I've taken the metro. Because Santa Monica is actually quite a condensed, small space within LA. The public transportation is actually like a lot easier to take and use. Like you really don't have to go too far to get from A to B. So yeah,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not surprised some of your
I
cameras are there.
No, absolutely. And then the last time I went to Santa Monica, I think they had just opened light rail that I believe was replacing a bus
Oh,
line.
right.
So I don't know if you were still in Santa Monica when that happened, but I yeah, had meetings in LA and then had to get to Santa Monica. So I think it was a couple of different lines, but I remember people were very excited that they'd gotten light rail at least closer to Santa Monica, if not all the way there.
Yeah, how long ago was that? How many years ago was that?
I'd say 2018, 2019. I think it might be the only time I've
Yeah,
ever been
okay.
to Santa Monica.
Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah. So they do have like a metro system, and I know that goes through to Santa Monica, that goes through to Third Street. I didn't. When you say light rail, you mean just like the ones that are like on
Yeah,
the
the
actual.
sort of at grade train that might go like 30, 35 miles an hour, but in that, close to vehicular traffic, not like, elevated or underground.
Oh,
Heavy rail.
okay, got it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I have seen that. Yeah, no, I think it's a condensed space, and yeah, yeah, again, I'm not surprised some of your cameras are on there already.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that's really good insight. I think going back to the AI piece, so I'm trying to sort of envision what this really looks like. So You've got it. What was it you called the camera on the bus? You called it something.
Uh,
You had a
maybe, well,
nickname for
the
it.
brain on the bus is the compute
That's
box.
it. Brain on the bus. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So you've got
yeah.
again, we've got speed cameras, you've got traffic light cameras. So what's the difference between having a standard camera on the bus versus the AI? How does the AI piece really work on there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have these two cameras and they're inside the windshield in the interior of the
Hmm.
bus facing out. And then we have something called a compute box that has, like an NVIDIA chip inside. And so
Okay.
basically, what a number of other, camera enforcement companies might do is every single night they load 16 to 24 hours worth of data, video,
Hmm.
they push it up through the cloud, and eventually it gets processed, at a third location. And so obviously it creates tremendous amounts of data. And also, we're capturing a license plate. And if you match that with Department of Motor Vehicle Registration, that's what we call PII, so like personally identifiable information. So we and certainly our government clients take any of that information extremely seriously. And so the
Hmm.
less of that that gets transmitted, the better as far as we're concerned. And so we do this thing called edge processing, which is possible because of this powerful compute box on the bus. So even though the cameras are on and they're viewing and interpreting images for the entire time that the bus is traveling, the only data that ever leaves the bus is what we call an evidence package. So if the cameras perceive a traffic violation, they snip maybe 6 or 8 seconds of video that gets transmitted through the cloud, and everything else that is on that compute box gets deleted after whatever period of time the agency decrees. Could be anywhere from maybe like 5 to 14 days. And so it never leaves the bus, it's permanently deleted. And so the amount of data that is sent is extremely small. And so that
Hmm.
reduces, any sort of risk of, cybersecurity or any other sort of data breach that would be putting, PII into the hands of someone who shouldn't have it.
Right. And with the use of computer vision and AI, what is it exactly capturing? Is it a capturing movement? Is that how it's triggering that?
Yeah, so we say that we capture objects, not people.
Okay.
So first of all, we absolutely do not use facial recognition technology, nor would we partner with a company that does. And so what we're interested in is the objects that are on the street. So at any given moment, our system has the ability to perceive about 2 to 3 dozen discrete objects. So that's why, for instance, we know exactly where the lane is that is a dedicated lane. We know the travel lane where the bus is. We can see the curb cut. We can see the bus stop if we're doing bus stop enforcement. And we also use something called SLAM, so it's simultaneous localization and mapping, and that gives us an extremely precise way to localize the object in space. So obviously, if we're part of a traffic enforcement program that a city is running, they need a
Hmm.
high degree of confidence that the vehicle is where they say it is. And so we have localization within 10 centimeters of accuracy to place that object in space and validate that with the data that we're capturing, both the images themselves and then some telematic data that we're able to gather from the bus itself.
Right. Okay.
And
Very
so
interesting.
Oh, yeah, and one other thing I was going to add, there are a lot of sometimes complex business rules. So some agencies may only have dedicated bus lanes for part of the day or for weekdays.
Hmm.
Sometimes an agency or a city is going to have a special event where, the bus lanes are not in service for a couple of days. So all of those policies that we call business rules are something that the compute box on the vehicle knows and factors into account when determining whether or not an object in a bus lane is a violation or not.
Okay, very cool. And just want to just double confirm. So what Hayden is providing right now is purely for buses. Is there future scope for them to maybe like broaden it out to like maybe like metros or any other sort of public transportation? I'm just curious.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the interesting things about this work is the equipment goes on the bus, but in every case that we've dealt with so far, it's actually a different government agency that does the ticketing. So, for instance,
Right.
New York MTA works with the New York City Department of Transportation. WMATA also works with the DC Department of Transportation. Some agencies work with like sheriff's office or parking authorities. And so the nature of the service that we provide requires intergovernmental agreements before we even get started. And so certainly, the transit agencies have the value proposition of clearing the street of these illegally parked vehicles, but the DOTs, the public works departments and other agencies within local or regional government might have a very different value proposition of things like has there been damage to a utility cabinet that could impact, uh, the intersection working correctly? And so, if we look at something like that called asset management, that would very likely be different agencies. But the fact that there are already multiple agencies working together, I think probably lowers some of the barriers to entry
Hmm.
that might otherwise be in place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, no, that definitely
Yeah.
does. Yeah, that makes sense. And would you say you guys have like a monopoly in this arena with regards to actually like implementing computer vision and AI in public transportation, or is there some other companies that are doing something similar?
Yeah, I would say, certainly there are competitors that are attempting to use mobile cameras for enforcement. But based on our understanding of the other companies in the market, we haven't yet seen the level of machine learning or artificial intelligence
Mm,
that our technology is providing. Yeah, so, we certainly are not going to rest on our laurels. And in fact, one thing that's really important to us is developing patents. So, for instance, we just announced one last week um, to for the specific casing that allows us to both have cameras that are inside the windshield of a vehicle, but also have enough
okay.
visibility without the glare from the windshield, so that we can still perceive these violations happening daytime, nighttime, rain, snow, all kinds of weather. So we're just continuing to try to build and protect our intellectual property with some of those patents.
Interesting, really interesting. So, really, your target customers in this is really mainly the government agencies, or is it actually beyond that?
Yes, yeah, I would say so.
Right.
It's one of the things that is challenging at a startup is I remember I had a boss who used to say, um, we can do anything, but we can't do everything. And so there are so many potential use cases for the cameras that we built, and are the quality of images and perceptions that we're able to gather from those
Mm,
images. But also I think especially as the climate for startups has changed a little bit, we're making sure that we've perfected what we've already built, and that we
yeah.
continue to sort of expand on the momentum that we're getting right now. And I think it's entirely possible there could be some business to business applications, but right now we're really focused on serving agencies and improving transit.
Yeah, I was going to say that's quite a long. I mean, for the sales team, it's quite a long cycle to really navigate around going into the government agencies because I think yeah, who's the point of contact, right, to really implement this? I think you need to get buy-in from a lot of different departments, especially with something so new. And some people probably have never heard of computer vision.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd say one of the real challenges that we have been working on and continue to work on is, um, typically, we're a startup, and so we have investors who fund us, and the sales cycle for selling to government is much longer than business to business or B2C. And so, managing the expectations of investors with the expectations for building a sales pipeline, executing on that pipeline, and serving government clients is something that thankfully we've been able to manage so far, but it's certainly something that you can't take for granted. You have to work on.
Mhm. And what about like, so what challenges do you find in general with, because I know you obviously you've been in the AI space for a while. What are the challenges is putting AI and these types of technologies, onto sort of um, things like buses, and how are you guys overcoming like some of the challenges? Again, that might be going back to what we just discussed around like how you're educating stakeholders around that.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one initial challenge I think is a lot of technology startups focus on software only. And in transportation, what's really valuable is being able to collect the data yourself and improve the data quality yourself. So there are a number of startups in the transportation space that are software only. And so the nature of transportation is just the data that you need to collect frequently comes from a piece of hardware. And so if you're a startup that's dependent on third parties for your data sources, in my opinion, that creates a ton of risk around,
Mm,
access to that data, the quality of data, the amount of cleaning that might have to be done, whether you're getting it from, the agency themselves or another third party hardware vendor. So the fact, so it's challenging, I think, to be a startup that is both hardware and software. But because we have overcome that challenge and built a product that works, we have control over the data that we're gathering and the quality of it.
hmm
And that's, I think, creating a really powerful moat that I think is going to make it more difficult for a competitor because we already have really high image quality, strong accuracy, and so that gives us a big advantage. Um, I think another challenge that if you were not very familiar with the transit industry, it might be hard to appreciate is just the value of the bus to the transit agency. It makes sense when you think about it, but an average sort of gas powered bus that might be a few years older could cost, say, $400,000. But if you're looking
mm,
at a zero emission fleet vehicle, it could be upwards of like 800,000 to over a million. And so we're asking a transit agency to put a piece of hardware on this extremely expensive physical asset they have to find space in one of their utility cabinets, which oftentimes is so packed. We've sometimes put our compute box upside down just because that was the only, we had to like drill it upside down
all
to a
right.
shelf because that was the only space left. And we also have an antenna that gets installed on the roof to ensure that we have Wi-Fi access because there are so many other competing needs for Wi-Fi on the vehicle. And so we're asking agencies to put some trust in us. And frankly, a lot of government agencies have been burned by startups who go out of business and quit answering the phone. And,
Oh,
there's a
wow.
lot that we need to demonstrate to agencies so that they're confident when they work with us, we're going to leave their bus in a better state than we found it, and that, we have the capability to actually take care of and manage, our equipment on a pretty valuable piece of machinery that they've invested in.
Mm. So is it a standalone product, or are you actually like creating a bespoke product for each bus, depending on whether one is zero emissions or another, and depending on the size?
I would say most of the hardware is the same on every bus, but what can be different is frankly there's a little piece of hardware casing around the cameras. So what's really important for us is that, we're making sure that we're not getting any sort of like sunlight glare or,
Mm,
obscured by rain. And so the casing needs to be very flush with the windshield. And so oftentimes that's going to be a little different. And there are so many different bus manufacturers and so many different years of production that frequently we do need to make minor adjustments to that casing so that we ensure the image quality remains high.
okay, really interesting. Yeah, this is all like really interesting and new stuff, and I can just see how this really just positively impacts society, especially in terms of their safety, especially in terms of like, controlling, road safety and so forth. So, just to kind of like wrap things up, I think what our listeners would like to potentially understand from you is, as yourself a leader in the AI and technology industry, how do you personally see the future of AI? In the likes of public transportation and also with urban planning.
Um, I am excited about AI, but I also
Mm,
have,
I
I
think we
think,
all
a
are.
lot of healthy skepticism. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not really setting the world on fire with that quote, right? Um, One thing that is really important to me is reading a variety of news sources and commentators on this topic. So for instance, I've played around with ChatGPT and with Perplexity AI, which is sort of a version of ChatGPT that includes sourcing so that you can check your sources because
Okay.
obviously integrity of what I'm getting back from an LLM is really important. Um, but I would also say, someone that I really admire and follow her work closely is a woman named Temrik Gebru, who was formerly at the Google ethics team, and I believe may have led
Mm.
it, and was let go a year or two ago. And so I want to get a well-rounded variety of experts talking about AI and be sure that we're thinking about what the risks are as we're deploying things. Um, One thing too that I think is important, artificial intelligence, you can apply it to numbers, you can apply it to language, you can apply it to place. And I think what's really important is being able to verify the accuracy of what your AI output might be. Um, for us, particularly doing traffic enforcement, all of the jurisdictions that use our technology require human review. So there's no situation where, a person gets a ticket in the mail and it's because a computer sent it to them and no person ever did a quality control check on it. So um, that I think is helpful for us in terms of overcoming some skepticism that folks may have about artificial intelligence being used by the public sector. And I'd say one thing that's really important to me is being able to talk about artificial intelligence without using a lot of jargon or giving the impression that it's too difficult for you to understand. So just trust me when I say everything is okay. So I'm actually soon going to be publishing like an 8 or 10 page white paper from a nonpartisan think tank in the US called the Eno Center that sort of lays
Oh,
out,
nice.
in plain language, here's what we're talking about when we say computer vision or neural network or artificial intelligence. Here are some practical ways that it could be applied for in different parts of the transportation industry and with the public sector that would make some real improvements to the way that we do business. So that's something I'm really proud of. It's going to be coming out
Oh, well,
sometime, I think, before the
congratulations.
summer ends. But thank you. But yeah, I want to demystify the technology because um, it's coming. I think it's going to be difficult and increasingly impossible for agencies to avoid using it. And so I
Mm.
think what's important is that there are people at those agencies who have enough of an understanding of what it is and that they work with vendors or consultants that can explain to them the safeguards that they've put in place, the sort of clear value proposition that they're offering if they're trying to sell them AI technology, and that there's as much transparency as possible around what the technology is doing and how it's built.
Oh, that's a lot you're doing there. Congratulations. And yeah, I can't wait to see when you've got that published. And I agree. I do think, yes, I don't think anything is going to be replaced with AI. I think really it's just going to enhance and make our work a lot more efficient. And I think that there still needs to be like a human element there. But then again, I feel like maybe in places like government agencies, there may be, in my opinion, there may be some departments that probably never heard about it. So I think, I think there is a real need and time dedication to really go about like educating individual folks about how computerized technology can really like enhance productivity and efficiency, especially in the likes of public transportation.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite podcast hosts says AI is not going to take your job, but someone who knows how to use AI might. And so I just try to
Yeah,
take a few
that's
minutes,
good.
a couple of times a week to kind of read my newsletters and test some of these new products that are coming out and figure out, would this help me do my job? Do I think it might help any of my coworkers? Is this a useful application or not? So just investing that time in myself to educate myself, I think is really important too.
Yeah, I also need to look at like there is a cheat sheet I saw somewhere that because most of the AI stuff I'm using is ChatGPT to really help with just double checking like my text and what I'm putting on LinkedIn. But I'm sure there's loads more out there that I'm probably not using that I should use. I.e., there's some for pictures, some for videos, maybe even for the podcast as well. There's some lurking around. I see it and I'm like I'm going to revisit that later.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, just to kind of wrap the podcast episode, is there anything else that you wanted to add and to tell our audience?
I don't think so. I feel like I was able
It
to
was a
fit in
really
everything I really hope to be able to express, and I just appreciate, the time and that you gave me a platform to talk about some of the work that Hayden is doing.
absolutely. And I think you're really inspiring, especially about working on AI on a really important cause and something that a lot of people are utilizing and using every day. So yeah, really, really exciting stuff what you're doing. With your own personal development and also at Hayden AI. So thank you so much for joining in on this podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Malika. I really appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care.